The Nowata Methodist Church is happy to produce a lot of different content for the edification of Christ's church throughout the world. This daily segment that you're listening to right now corresponds with the Daily Bible Reading Challenge, which is hosted by Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. If you want to download the list of readings that they publish for yourself or learn more about this challenge, this initiative, go to biblereading.christkirk.com. I'm Jeffrey Rickman. I'm the pastor here in Nowata, and I read from the Berean Standard Bible, which you can also find at berean.bible. Consider subscribing to this podcast to be a part of this daily effort to grow in familiarity with and love of God's holy word. Let's dive in for today. All right, friends, we are at the end of Chronicles. Today we're going to finish 2nd Chronicles. Just do the last few chapters, and that's going to be it for us today. So hope you're in a good place to do that. It's history, it's theology, it's all of the most interesting stuff put together. So let's enjoy along the way, huh? All right, we're now in 2nd Chronicles chapter 31. When all this had ended, the Israelites in attendance went out to the cities of Judah and broke up the sacred pillars, chopped down the Asherah poles, and tore down the high places and altars throughout Judah and Benjamin, as well as in Ephraim and Manasseh, until they had utterly destroyed them all. Then all the Israelites returned to their cities, each to his own property. Hezekiah reestablished the divisions of the priests and Levites, each of them according to their duties as priests or Levites, for the burnt offerings and peace offerings, for ministry, for giving thanks, and for singing praises at the gates of the Lord's dwelling. The king contributed from his own possessions for the regular morning and evening burnt offerings, and for the burnt offerings on the Sabbaths, new moons, and appointed feasts, as written in the law of the Lord. Moreover, he commanded the people living in Jerusalem to make a contribution for the priests and Levites, so that they could devote themselves to the law of the Lord. As soon as the order went out, the Israelites generously provided the first fruits of the grain, new wine, oil, and honey, and all of the produce of the field, and they brought in an abundance, a tithe of everything. And the Israelites and Judahites who lived in the cities of Judah also brought a tithe of their herds and flocks, and a tithe of the holy things consecrated to the Lord their God, and they laid them in large heaps. In the 3rd month they began building up the heaps, and they finished in the 7th month. When Hezekiah and his officials came and viewed the heaps, they blessed the Lord and his people Israel. Then Hezekiah questioned the priests and Levites about the heaps, and Azariah, the chief priest of the household of Zadok, answered him, "Since the people began to bring their contributions into the house of the Lord, we have had enough to eat, and there is plenty left over, because the Lord has blessed his people. This great abundance is what is left over." Then Hezekiah commanded them to prepare storerooms in the house of the Lord, and they did so. And they faithfully brought in the contributions, tithes, and dedicated gifts. Conaniah the Levite was the officer in charge of them, and his brother Shimei was second. Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Asahel, Jeremoth, Jozabad, Eliel, Ismachiah, Mahath, and Benaiah were overseers under the authority of Conaniah and his brother Shimei by appointment of King Hezekiah and of Azariah, the chief official of the house of God. Koreh, son of Imnah, the Levite, the keeper of the east gate, was in charge of the freewill offerings given to God, distributing the contributions to the Lord and the consecrated gifts. Under his authority, Eden, Miniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah faithfully distributed portions to the fellow priests in the cities, according to their divisions, old and young alike. In addition, they distributed portions to the males registered by genealogy, who were 3 years of age or older, to all who would enter the house of the Lord for their daily duties for service and the responsibilities of their divisions. and to the priests enrolled according to their families in the genealogy, as well as to the Levites 20 years of age or older according to their duties and divisions. The genealogy included all the little ones, wives, sons, and daughters in the whole assembly, for they had faithfully consecrated themselves as holy. As for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who lived on the farmlands around each of their cities or in any other city, men were designated by name to distribute a portion to every male among the priests and to every Levite listed by the genealogies. So this is what Hezekiah did throughout Judah. He did what was good and upright and true before the Lord his God. He was diligent in every work that he began in the service of the house of God and in the law and the commandments in order to seek his God, and so he prospered. 2 Chronicles chapter 32. After all these acts of faithfulness, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah. He laid siege to the fortified cities, intending to conquer them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come to make war against Jerusalem, he consulted with his leaders and commanders about stopping up the waters of the springs outside the city, and they helped him carry it out. Many people assembled and stopped up all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land. Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water, they said. Then Hezekiah worked resolutely to rebuild all the broken sections of the wall and to raise up towers on it. He also built an outer wall and reinforced the supporting terraces of the city of David, and he produced an abundance of weapons and shields. Hezekiah appointed military commanders over the people and gathered the people in the square of the city gate. Then he encouraged them, saying, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged before the king of Assyria and the vast army with him, for there is a greater one with us than with him. With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord, our God, to help us and to fight our battles." So the people were strengthened by the words of Hezekiah, king of Judah. Later, as Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and all his forces besieged Lachish, he sent his servants to Jerusalem with a message for King Hezekiah of Judah and all the people of Judah who were in Jerusalem. This is what Sennacherib, king of Assyria, says: "What is the basis of your confidence that you remain in Jerusalem under siege? Is not Hezekiah misleading you to give you over to death by famine and thirst when he says, 'The Lord our God will deliver us from the hand of the king of Assyria'? Did not Hezekiah himself remove his high places and his altars, and say to Judah and Jerusalem, 'You must worship before one altar, and on it you shall burn sacrifices'? Do you not know what I and my fathers have done to all the peoples of the lands? Have the gods of these nations ever been able to deliver their land from my hand? Who among all the gods of these nations that my fathers devoted to destruction has been able to deliver his people from my hand? How then can your God deliver you from my hand? So now do not let Hezekiah deceive you, and do not let him mislead you like this. Do not believe him, for no God of any nation or kingdom has been able to deliver his people from my hand, or from the hand of my fathers. How much less will your God deliver you from my hand?" And the servants of Sennacherib spoke further against the Lord God and against his servant Hezekiah. He also wrote letters mocking the Lord, the God of Israel, and saying against him, "Just as the gods of the nations did not deliver their people from my hand, so the God of Hezekiah will not deliver his people from my hand." Then the Assyrians called out loudly in Hebrew to the people of Jerusalem who were on the wall, to frighten and terrify them in order to capture the city. They spoke against the God of Jerusalem as they had spoken against the gods of the peoples of the earth, the work of human hands. In response, King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, cried out to heaven in prayer. And the Lord sent an angel who annihilated every mighty man of valor and every leader and commander in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he withdrew to his own land in disgrace. And when he entered the temple of his God, some of his own sons struck him down with the sword. So the Lord saved Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem from the hands of King Sennacherib of Assyria and all the others, and he gave them rest on every side. Many brought offerings to Jerusalem for the Lord and valuable gifts for Hezekiah king of Judah, and from then on he was exalted in the eyes of all nations. In those days Hezekiah became mortally ill, so he prayed to the Lord, who spoke to him and gave him a sign. But because his heart was proud, Hezekiah did not repay the favor shown to him. Therefore wrath came upon him and upon Judah and Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah humbled the pride of his heart, he and the people of Jerusalem, so that the wrath of the Lord did not come upon them during the days of Hezekiah. Hezekiah had very great riches and honor, and he made treasuries for his silver, gold, precious stones, spices, shields, and all kinds of valuable articles. He also made storehouses for the harvest of grain and new wine and oil, stalls for all kinds of livestock, and pens for the flocks. He made cities for himself, and he acquired herds of sheep and cattle in abundance, for God gave him very great wealth. It was Hezekiah who blocked the upper outlet of the spring of Gihon and channeled it down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all that he did. And so when ambassadors of the rulers of Babylon were sent to him to inquire about the wonder that had happened in the land, God left him alone to test him, that he might know all that was in Hezekiah's heart. As for the rest of the acts of Hezekiah and his deeds of loving devotion, they are indeed written in the vision of the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And Hezekiah rested with his fathers and was buried in the upper tombs of David's descendants. All Judah and the people of Jerusalem paid him honor at his death, and his son Manasseh reigned in his place. 2 Chronicles chapter 33. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord by following the abominations of the nations that the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. For he rebuilt the high places that his father Hezekiah had torn down, and he raised up altars for the Baals and made Asherah poles, and he worshipped and served all the host of heaven. Manasseh also built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "My name will remain in Jerusalem forever." In both courtyards of the house of the Lord he built altars to the host of heaven. He sacrificed his sons in the fire in the valley of Hinnom. He practiced sorcery, divination, and witchcraft, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did great evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. Manasseh even took the carved image he had made and set it up in the house of God, of which God had said to David and his son Solomon, "In this temple and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will establish my name forever. I will never again cause the feet of the Israelites to leave the land that I assigned to your fathers, if only they are careful to do all that I have commanded them through Moses, all the laws, statutes, and judgments." So Manasseh led the people of Judah and Jerusalem astray, so that they did greater evil than the nations that the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites. And the Lord spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they did not listen. So the Lord brought against them the military commanders of the king of Assyria, who captured Manasseh, put a hook in his nose, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon. And in his distress, Manasseh sought the favor of the Lord his God, and earnestly humbled himself before the God of his fathers. And when he prayed to him, the Lord received his plea and heard his petition. So he brought him back to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord is God. After this, Manasseh rebuilt the outer wall of the city of David from west of Gihon in the valley to the entrance of the fish gate, and he brought it around the hill of Ophel and heightened it considerably. He also stationed military commanders in all the fortified cities of Judah. He removed the foreign gods and the idol from the house of the Lord, along with all the altars he had built on the Temple Mount and in Jerusalem, and he dumped them outside the city. Then he restored the altar of the Lord and sacrificed peace offerings and thank offerings on it, and he told Judah to serve the Lord, the God of Israel. Nevertheless, the people still sacrificed at the high places, but only to the Lord their God. As for the rest of the acts of Manasseh, along with his prayer to his God and the words of the seers who spoke to him in the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, they are indeed written in the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. His prayer and how God received his plea, as well as all his sin and unfaithfulness, and the sites where he built high places and set up Asherah poles and idols before he humbled himself, they are indeed written in the records of the seers. And Manasseh rested with his fathers and was buried at his palace, and his son Amon reigned in his place. Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 2 years, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done. Amon served and sacrificed to all the idols that his father Manasseh had made, but he did not humble himself before the Lord as his father Manasseh had done. Instead, Amon increased his guilt. Then the servants of Amon conspired against him and killed him in his palace. But the people of the land killed all those who had conspired against King Amon, and they made his son Josiah king in his place. We're now at 2 Chronicles chapter 34. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and walked in the ways of his father David. He did not turn aside to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, Josiah began to seek the God of his father David, and in the 12th year he began to cleanse Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the Asherah poles, the carved idols, and the cast images. Then in his presence the altars of the Baals were torn down, and he cut to pieces the incense altars that were above them. He shattered the Asherah poles, the carved idols, and the cast images, crushed them to dust, and scattered them over the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. Then he burned the bones of the priests on their altars, so he cleansed Judah and Jerusalem. Josiah did the same in the cities of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as well as far as Naphtali, and in the ruins around them. He tore down the altars and Asherah poles, crushed the idols to power, and cut to pieces all the incense altars throughout the land of Israel. Then he returned to Jerusalem. Now, in the 18th year of his reign, in order to cleanse the land and the temple, Josiah sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, Maaseiah, the governor of the city, and Joah, son of Joahaz, the recorder, to repair the house of the Lord his God. So they went to Hilkiah the high priest, and gave him the money that had been brought into the house of God, which the Levites at the doors had collected from the people of Manasseh and Ephraim, and from all the remnant of Israel, Judah, and Benjamin, and from the people of Jerusalem. They put it into the hands of the supervisors of those doing the work of the house of the Lord, who in turn gave it to the workmen restoring and repairing the house of the Lord. They also gave money to the carpenters and builders to buy dressed stone, as well as timbers for couplings and beams for the buildings that the kings of Judah had allowed to deteriorate. And the men did the work faithfully. The Levites overseeing them were Jahath and Obadiah, descendants of Merari, and Zechariah and Meshullam, descendants of Kohath. Other Levites are all skilled with musical instruments, were over the laborers, and supervised all who did the work, task by task. Some of the Levites were secretaries, officers, and gatekeepers. While they were bringing out the money that had been taken into the house of the Lord, Hilkiah the priest found the book of the law of the Lord written by Moses. And Hilkiah said to Shaphan the scribe, "I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord." And he gave it to Shaphan. Then Shaphan brought the book to the king and reported, Your servants are doing all that has been placed in their hands. They have paid out the money that was found in the house of the Lord and have put it into the hands of the supervisors and workers. Moreover, Shaphan the scribe told the king, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book. And Shaphan read it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the law, he tore his clothes and commanded Hilkiah, Ahikam son of Shaphan, Abdon son of Micah, Shaphan the scribe, and Asaiah the servant of the king, go and inquire of the Lord for me and for those remaining in Israel and Judah concerning the words in the book that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that has been poured out on us, because our fathers have not kept the word of the Lord by doing all that is written in this book. So Hilkiah and those the king had designated went and spoke to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum son of Tokath, the son of Hazra, the keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the 2nd district. And Huldah said to them, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you that this is what the Lord says. I am about to bring calamity on this place and on its people, according to all the curses written in the book that has been read in the presence of the king of Judah. Because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. My wrath will be poured out upon this place and will not be quenched. But as for the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of the Lord, tell him that this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. As for the words that you heard, because your heart was tender, and you humbled yourself before God when you heard his words against this place and against its people, and because you have humbled yourself before me, and you have torn your clothes and wept before me, I have heard you, declares the Lord. Now I will indeed gather you to your fathers, and you will be gathered to your grave in peace. Your eyes will not see all the calamity that I will bring on this place and on its inhabitants. So they brought her answer back to the king. Then the king summoned all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. And he went up to the house of the Lord with all the people of Judah and Jerusalem, as well as the priests and the Levites, all the people small and great. And in their hearing he read all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of the Lord. So the king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to follow the Lord, and to keep his commandments, decrees, and statutes with all his heart and all his soul, and to carry out the words of this covenant that were written in this book. Then he had everyone in Jerusalem and Benjamin take a stand in agreement to it. So all the people of Jerusalem carried out the covenant of God, the God of their fathers. And Josiah removed all the abominations from all the lands belonging to the Israelites. And he required everyone in Israel to serve the Lord their God throughout his reign. They did not turn aside from following the Lord, the God of their fathers. 2 Chronicles chapter 35. Then Josiah celebrated the Passover to the Lord in Jerusalem, and the Passover lamb was slaughtered on the 14th day of the first month. He appointed the priests to their duties and encouraged them in the service of the house of the Lord. To the Levites who taught all Israel and were holy to the Lord, Josiah said, Put the holy ark in the temple built by Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. It is not to be carried around on your shoulders. Now serve the Lord your God and his people Israel. Prepare yourselves by families and your divisions according to the instructions written by David, king of Israel, and Solomon his son. Moreover, stand in the holy place by the divisions of the families of your kinsmen, the lay people, and by the divisions of the families of the Levites. Slaughter the Passover lambs, consecrate yourselves, and make preparations for your fellow countrymen to carry out the word of the Lord given by Moses. From his own flocks and herds, Josiah contributed 30,000 lambs and goats, plus 3,000 bulls, for the Passover offerings for all the people who were present. His officials also contributed willingly to the people, and priests and Levites. Hilkiah, Zechariah, and Jehiel, the administrators of the house of God, gave the priests 2,600 Passover offerings and 300 bulls. Additionally, Conaniah and his brothers Shemaiah and Nethanel, as well as Hashabiah, Jael, and Jozabad, officers of the Levites, donated to the Levites 5,000 Passover offerings and 500 bulls. So the service was prepared. The priests stood in their places, and the Levites in their divisions, according to the king's command. And they slaughtered the Passover lambs, while the priests sprinkled the blood handed to them, and the Levites skinned the animals. They set aside the burnt offerings to be given to the divisions of the families of the people to offer to the Lord, as it is written in the book of Moses. And they did the same with the bulls. They roasted the Passover animals on the fire according to the regulation, and they boiled the other holy offerings in pots, kettles, and bowls, and quickly brought them all to the people. Afterward, they made preparations for themselves and for the priests, since the priests, the descendants of Aaron, were offering up burnt offerings and fat until nightfall. So the Levites made preparations for themselves and for the priests, the descendants of Aaron. The singers, the descendants of Asaph, were at their stations according to the command of David, Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, the king's seer. And the gatekeepers at each gate did not need to leave their position, because their fellow Levites made preparations for them. So on that day, the entire service of the Lord was carried out for celebrating the Passover and offering burnt offerings on the altar of the Lord, according to the command of King Josiah. The Israelites who were present also observed the Passover at that time, as well as the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. No such Passover had been observed in Israel since the days of Samuel the prophet. None of the kings of Israel ever observed a Passover like the one that Josiah observed with the priests, the Levites, all Judah, the Israelites who were present, and the people of Jerusalem. In the 18th year of Josiah's reign, this Passover was observed. After all this, when Josiah had set the temple in order, Necho, king of Egypt, marched up to fight at Carchemish by the Euphrates, and Josiah went out to confront him. But Necho sent messengers to him, saying, "What is the issue between you and me, O king of Judah? I have not come against you today, but I am fighting another dynasty. God told me to hurry, so stop opposing God who is with me, or he will destroy you." Josiah, however, did not turn away from him. Instead, in order to engage him in battle, he disguised himself. He did not listen to Necho's words from the mouth of God, but went to fight him on the plain of Megiddo. There the archers shot King Josiah, who said to his servants, "Take me away, for I am badly wounded." So his servants took him out of his chariot, put him in a second chariot, and brought him to Jerusalem, where he died. And Josiah was buried in the tomb of his fathers, and all Judah and Jerusalem mourned for him. Then Jeremiah lamented over Josiah, and to this day all the choirs of men and women sing laments over Josiah. They established them as a statute for Israel, and indeed they are written in the book of laments. As for the rest of the acts of Josiah, along with his deeds of loving devotion according to what is written in the law of the Lord, his acts from beginning to end, they are indeed written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, our final chapter. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, and made him king in Jerusalem in place of his father. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. And the king of Egypt dethroned him in Jerusalem and imposed on Judah a levy of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Then Necho, king of Egypt, made Eliakim, brother of Jehoahaz, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and he changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Eliakim's brother Jehoahaz and carried him off to Egypt. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord his God. Then Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jehoiakim and bound him with bronze shackles to take him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took to Babylon some of the articles from the house of the Lord, and he put them in his temple in Babylon. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim, the abominations he committed, and all that was found against him, They are indeed written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah, and his son Jehoiachin reigned in his place. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months and 10 days, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. In the spring, King Nebuchadnezzar, summoned Jehoiachin and brought him to Babylon, along with the articles of value from the house of the Lord. And he made Jehoiachin's relative Zedekiah king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord his God, and did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke for the Lord. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by God. But Zedekiah stiffened his neck and hardened his heart against turning to the Lord, the God of Israel. Furthermore, all the leaders of the priests and the people multiplied their unfaithful deeds, following all the abominations of the nations, and they defiled the house of the Lord, which he had consecrated in Jerusalem. Again and again the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to his people through his messengers, because he had compassion on them and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God, despising his words and scoffing at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord against his people was stirred up beyond remedy. So he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who put their young men to the sword in the sanctuary, sparing neither young men nor young women, neither elderly nor infirm. God gave them all into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, who carried off everything to Babylon, all the articles of the house of God, both large and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and of the king, and of his officials. Then the Chaldeans set fire to the house of God, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem. They burned down all the palaces, and destroyed every article of value. Those who escaped the sword were carried by Nebuchadnezzar into exile in Babylon, and they became servants to him and his sons, until the kingdom of Persia came to power. So the land enjoyed its Sabbath rest all the days of desolation, until 70 years were completed, in fulfillment of the word of the Lord through Jeremiah. In the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken through Jeremiah, the Lord stirred the spirit of Cyrus king of Persia to send a proclamation throughout his kingdom, and to put it in writing as follows. This is what Cyrus king of Persia says. The Lord, the God of heaven, who has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, has appointed me to build a house for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Whoever among you belongs to his people, may the Lord his God be with him, and may he go up. The word of the Lord. And that's how it all ends, friends. Or rather, the story goes on, and we're actually going to pick up in Ezra tomorrow. And so that picks up historically where we are. A lot of great history continuing forward, although the authorship is a little bit different. So you'll see. It'll be good. But in the meantime, just a reminder, as you know, we go through all these kings and they are assessed, whether or not we ever become historical figures, our names are written, our lives are written, our history is known, and one day we will all be called to account for how it is that we administered that which the Lord entrusted us. And as Jesus warned, that to whom much is given, much is expected. And so take into account your many blessings the Lord has given you, and be faithful. All right, that'll be it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Blessings.